Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet again another beautiful Trolley Tuesday. And today we are covering the history of the Lionel Bernie trolley. So, the first car we're going to take a look at, we're winding the clock back all the way to 1955. And this is our first mainstream product release Lionel O-scale trolley. Now, Lionel had made streetcars before, but only in standard gauge, and they made a very limited production run of these. They would oftentimes come as singles or in pairs. You'd have a trailer car and a powered car. But there was one problem. These cars sold so well, mainly because you just needed a loop of track and just one or two of the cars themselves. You didn't need to buy anything else because, well, trolleys ran by themselves for the most part. You couldn't make a train out of a trolley. So Lionel stopped producing them so that way they could make more money off of their regular train sets. However, once they perfected their bump and go cars in the mid to late 50s, they had decided to create a new O-scale trolley using the same mechanism. The first cars to use the mechanism were the automatic gang cars, as well as the fire train, as I call it. It bumps back and forth. It's not based on anything in particular, but it's still fun to see. Now, why do I say that this is a Type B? I don't know if I said it already, but this is the B variant trolley. The A's are the prototype versions of this car. The original prototypes for the Lionel Bernie cars had molded in bumpers as well as no side frames for their wheels. You could just see the wheels. Now, the wheels that these cars are using actually come off of the Lionel turbine locomotives. They just never drilled out the spot where you're supposed to put the pin or screw bolt for the side rods. And it has one powered wheel and one unpowered wheel. But the B variants were the ones that were able to be put to market. Now, this is the first version that was made. This is a fully original Lionel 60 car. Now, what makes these so special? Well, first of all, this is a first year run. So we have the black lettering, and we also have the solid roof, and we have one more special feature. Now, as you can see, there are silhouettes inside of the car. And whenever the car moves, there's a light in it. And as it moves along, it lights up the interior, and you can see the people. But in conjunction to those people, you need someone driving the car, and that person is a motorman. And before you say anything, no, this is not a painted silhouette. This is a separate figure. As the car moves along, as I'm sure everyone has seen a Lionel Bernie car move, as it moves, the bumper gets pushed in, it pushes a plate in or out of the E unit socket, and it reverses the polarity, and it makes the pole move back. Well, it did one more thing as well. You can see the motorman sitting there, but watch what happens. Oh, he disappears. And as he disappears from this end, oh, there he is again. He's back at the other end. So as the car bumps back and forth, you would see the motorman go to the correct end, and he would drive the car back and forth. And the first year productions of these cars were the only ones to have them. As such, the motormen are actually separate figures that are clipped into the base right here of the bumper on the inside. However, Lionel figured that not too many people would really care about that little feature, and as such, they only remained on the first year models. So now we have our Type C variant. So this is after 1955. This is in 1956, I believe. So these are the second variants that came out. Now, as you see right here, The lettering on the sides is no longer in black, but instead it is blue. And you'll notice that it's got more of an imprint to it. This one originally, these are etched in. However, over here on this car, they're actually, they are etched in, but they're very, very flat. They're not as deep. Also, the lettering is blue instead of black. And gone is the motorman. But more or less the same function carries. And another thing to note, as you see here, the roof is still solid. More or less, same features. The pole will flip back and forth as the car goes along. It still has a light, and it still has the passenger silhouettes. So, not too much change there. And now we come on to the tail end of that, about early to mid-late 60s, when they still made the cars. And this is the, this is the D variant. And this is probably one of the most common variants. As you see, the bumper has been changed. It is now one solid piece on the top and on the fronts. And one other thing you'll notice. The roof up here, if my camera will focus. There we go. If you notice, it's got little vents in its roof. Now, a lot of collectors mislabel this as being a, quote, cloistery roof because of this feature. This is not a cloistery roof. A cloistery roof has windows, not vents. They're completely different. Of course, you got the same functionality. The pole will flip around as the bumpers are pushed in place. And you'll also notice that on this car, at the very least, these are not etched in. These are rubber stamped on, which is very interesting. And they're quite faded. But aside from that, the design has stayed the exact same. So now we're going to take a break through the late 60s, all the way past the 70s, and now into the early 80s. And here we have the first of the new generation of Lionel trolleys. So these are affectionately referred to as the monster bumper cars, and you can see why. So the wheels that these guys use, which is interesting, come off of the Lionel GG1s, and both wheels are powered. This is the only variant of cars. Any one of these that you see that have these really fat bumpers are the only ones that have all four max traction. They're all geared together. And, of course, the bumpers do press in and the pole still moves around. Of course, this is the wrong pole for the San Francisco car. It's supposed to be a short pole, not a long one. But I don't have a short one, so I used what I had. And, of course, everyone asks, what are these made out of? These bumpers are made out of rubber. They are squishy. So you can run this thing at full speed into a wall and it won't destroy the bumper or crack the shell. The only major problem with these is that, number one, they look ugly, and number two, they sometimes will bind up like so, and they won't clear all the way, and they'll get caught on this side on the doors, and they'll just not unlatch themselves. So it'll bump, and it'll just keep pushing until a click, and it's able to bounce back again. So, yeah. And, of course, the first variant of these, and it's the only version that I have. I do have another one of these green bodies for the San Francisco car, but it's on an original 60 chassis. But this is the only one that I own. But there are some more variants of these. There is a red car that says Lionelville or Lionel Electric, I think. And then there's another one that is blue and orange. And I believe there's another one after that, but I can't remember its color scheme. Anyway, so now we jump into the early 90s. So this is the cloistery roof Bernie car. Lionel only made this for a handful of years. There's not a lot of these lying around. But this is the main version that they came out with. So as you see, it is a solid yellow, much more reminiscent of the original Bernies. And it's got a gray roof. Now, there are some of them that have red roofs. I custom made one that has a red roof, but you'll notice something. And this is something that was on the San Francisco car, but it's a bit hard to pick up. But the Bernie cars now have a motorman and a conductor on them. They're not figures. They are simply silhouettes that are put on the same as the passengers are. And another thing you'll notice, the chassis has completely changed. So these cars no longer have an electronic E-unit inside of them, which is very big and very bulky. They needed vertical motors for those. This now has a DC can motor in it, and we've gone back to having one unpowered wheel and one powered wheel, and it no longer uses pickup rollers. Instead, it uses a pickup shoe, which is garbage. But also, the bumpers have changed once again, and they now actually look like regular streetcar bumpers. And what's interesting is that these are two separate pieces. They're not one piece. So whenever this one depresses in, the other one won't bulge out. Same on the other side. So it looks a little bit nicer, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Now, there were a handful of Bernies that did have a cloistery roof in real life, but usually they were the double truck variants, not a single truck variant. I have seen one single truck variant with a cloistery roof, and that was because that car was built from another one entirely, cannibalized parts, more or less. And now we come into recent years, so basically 2005 onwards, I believe, Lionel started making this version of their Bernie cars. Now, everything ostensibly is the same as the prior two, except for two major differences. Once again, the chassis has been changed ever so slightly, and now there's no longer a pickup shoe, but instead we have pickup rollers, which are spring-loaded, very nice. And we also have a brand new roof. Up until this point, Lionel had their own styled roof that they had used. And then they moved over to a cloistery roof, and then they moved to this. So for anyone who doesn't know, there are two conflicting stories as to why Lionel adopted this roof. So the first one, which arguably has a lot more proof behind it, when MTH came out with their bump and go car, which was a completely unique brill trolley, they wanted to make a Bernie car to accompany it, and basically copied Lionel's mold, but they basically used the PCC trolley's pole on its roof. And Lionel kind of got mad and either sued or put a cease and desist to MTH, and they dropped that. So just to make it so that nobody else could copy them, they adopted the same roof mold that the company Corgi, if you know any model miniatures from across the pond over in Europe, you'll know that Corgi is a die-cast manufacturer. They make miniature models in die-cast, and that includes two American trolleys. They make the Bernie safety car and the PCC, both in 1/50th scale as opposed to 1/48th like you see here. So Lionel went and actually bought out the molds, I believe, from Corgi to produce this version of the streetcar roof that you see. And also, you'll notice that it has these little bars on the window, which is interesting. Or safety bars, I should say, on the window. But these poles do not function whatsoever. They don't turn, they don't swivel. All they do is they go up, and then they go back down sometimes. Now, is this accurate to Bernie cars in real life? Yes, this is much more accurate. The only difference, though, from Lionel and Corgi is the fact that Lionel's roofs are shorter in length and wider in width, whereas with Corgi, they are longer in length and shorter in width, which is pretty interesting. And, of course, this one does have the motorman and the conductor in it, even though, historically speaking, Bernies only have motormen. They're too small to require a conductor. But yeah, I hope you guys liked that little timeline that you see here of all the Bernie cars. And now on to my next little announcement for this video. I have indeed finally set up the Patreon account. It's been up for a little while. It is for my own model railroad club, the Northern Texas Traction Club. Now, I know what everyone's thinking. Well, wait a minute, James. You've got trolleys from all over the place. You've got some from San Francisco, some from, Texas, a few from Louisiana, and so on and so forth. How come you're limiting yourself to only Northern Texas streetcars and such? Well, it's a very long story, but it's not limited in the way that people think. The name Northern Texas Traction simply comes from the location, as my club is based in North Texas, plain and simple. And as for everything else, I will cover other streetcars and everything else, and so can you. That's right, you, the everyday viewer, for just $3 per month, can help make more Trolley Tuesday videos. And yes, we do have some goals set up, monetarily wise. Now, I know what everyone else is thinking. Well, James, wait a minute. If you're able to have this many trolleys and make so many videos on them, why do you need funding? Well, number one, I can't keep pulling my own personal money to just buy streetcars. I need to pay for bills and for everything else as is. And secondly, there's just some streetcars and models that I simply don't want to buy, but yet are very popular and, oddly enough, aren't reviewed very often, and I get requests constantly to review them, like the Bachman-Peterwitt cars, which, even though they're super popular, no one's really done a full-blown review on them. So, and I get a lot of requests to do them. Would I personally want a Bachman-Peterwitt? Not in particular, but if someone's willing to shell out the money and donate, then they can make it happen. And it's a better alternative to running ads on my videos. Now, personally, I don't really like running ads on videos, although there are some videos on my channel that unfortunately have been copyright claimed and have ads regardless of whether or not I want them on there. So, if you want to support my channel, you can go down to the link in the description below, www.patreon.com/NTTC or whatever. It's going to be down in the description, so you can go down there. And we do have several tiers. If you want to actually be a member and go to club meetings, as well as being able to vote on what the club gets to do, you can spend $15 a month and become a club member. Or if you have a lot of money and you would like to support even more, you can become either a motorman or conductor or train master. Or if you're a local museum or historical group that wants certain trolleys or things to be covered and you want to donate, you can become part of our alliance system for $1 a month. And the best part is that custom commissions are indeed allowed, and you can get your own custom-made trolley, although it's going to cost a pretty penny, as is anything else. These little guys aren't cheap, I can tell you that much. So anyway, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next Trolley Tuesday.